Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to cover the good, the bad, and the inexplicable of movies, either starring, about, or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a short filmmaker and video artist, and I also write for The Geek Show and Byline Times. And despite the fact that it has been said we don't need another hero, I've been joined this week by...
Hello, my name is Rob, also known as Prob, which stands for Producer Rob. I'm one of the originals from The Geek Show, and I will be bringing The Geek Show back as a streaming thing very soon. We are in the process of bringing it back, because it was originally a radio show, and we're kind of going back to our roots with that when it comes to streaming. So that's something to look forward to. But aside from that, I'm also one of the editors of our site as well. So if you are wondering where the commas come from, that'll be me.
Hey, yes, that's your job, comma adder.
Yeah, and comma adder and paragraph maker.
Yeah. And you haven't been on this show for ages. I've let it slip. I think the last time you were on was when we did Labyrinth as part of our Bowie month, which is...
yeah, because I think Labyrinth was quite a long time ago, and it's been ages since I've seen you. The last time I saw you was in our local town when we just had a quick stop and chat. But how have you been?
Oh, I've been fine. I've been obviously doing this. I've been doing a lot of boring things that listeners probably don't want to hear about, because this week we are going topical. There is a new... it is technically a new Mad Max movie, even though it doesn't look like Mad Max himself is in it. It's in the world of Mad Max. It's Furiosa. And we decided to double back to what I think is the only Mad Max movie that would qualify for this podcast.
I suppose when you look back at the first two movies, there probably was somebody who became a pop star later, maybe in one of them. Possibly, I don't know. Maybe Tokota became a pop star at some point. You never know. Doing a duet with Kylie, or maybe Jason Donovan or something like that.
Yeah.
You never know. It could happen in another reality.
Yes. I suppose Mad Max Fury Road has that legendary musician, the Doof Warrior.
Yes. Yeah. It is still cool.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. But I think the only one we could honestly do was Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which stars Mel Gibson, of course, and Tina Turner.
Yep. And I have to just start by specifying one thing. It is Beyond Thunderdome, not Beyond the Thunderdome. Because so many people... No, you said it correctly.
Oh, but
many people I've spoken to in the last week, when I said to people, yeah, I'm going to be on a podcast, we're talking about the third Mad Max movie, and they're like, Beyond the Thunderdome. I'm like, no, it's Beyond Thunderdome, not Beyond the Thunderdome. It's such a little thing, but it's weird how it works, isn't it?
What a strange thing for like everyone. You realise that now we've said this, there'll be people online saying this is the Mandela effect. That's what happens when like people on the internet can't admit that they misremembered something.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, very odd stuff. But I remember us doing Mad Max Fury Road back in the Cinema Eclectica days.
I remember we all went to the cinema to see it, and we all walked out with big, stupid grins on our faces.
We did, because it's incredible.
Seeing it on the big screen is the ideal way to see Fury Road.
Totally, yeah. And
I mean,
I hope someone will be bringing it back on to lead up to Furiosa. I think
oh
that would
yeah,
be great.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
just the line from the oh, I've forgotten his name. But when he's driving into the massive hurricane,
Yes.
the massive twister, he's like, "What a day! What a lovely day!"
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that line.
Now here's the thing. When we did this on Eclectica, I can't remember what everyone else's familiarity with the Mad Max films was like. I hadn't watched any of them before then, and you really had, and you were like coming out with Mad Max trivia that was not even something I wondered about when I was watching the film. It was just beyond my imaginings. Since then,
Yeah.
I have still not watched any of the original Mad Max trilogy until now.
Okay, so I think we have to go with your thoughts first then here.
Well, it's interesting, yeah, because I'd always heard that Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was like a real disappointment, and if you were rewatching these in preparation for Fury Road or Furiosa, you definitely don't have to watch this one. Skip it. I liked it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common thing with hindsight now.
Mm,
I think people have mellowed a lot. I think one of the problems that happened with Beyond Thunderdome is partly the inclusion of Tina Turner.
mm.
I remember when Beyond Thunderdome came out and people were going, Tina Turner in a Mad Max film?
It
That
is an
don't
odd
make sense.
pull.
It is an odd pull, but it really works.
Yeah.
In a weird sense, it really works. And see, I've always liked Beyond Thunderdome, and people called me weird for liking Beyond Thunderdome, but I've been proven right because Graham likes it as well. And he is, at the end of the day, one of the arbiters of taste. Let's be fair.
Yeah. And I think before we sort of dig into why it deserves a second look, we should probably look at a few of the reasons why people didn't like it, both the
Yeah,
ones that are reasonable, the reasonable criticisms, and the ones that are a bit odd. Because, like you say, I mean, it's obviously going to be different looking at this after Tina Turner's death and at a point
yeah,
where there's nothing in question about her legacy. She is going to go down as one of the great rock and soul vocalists.
yeah,
That's been proven. So yeah, it feels very strange that people were arsy about that.
yeah. And I think one of the problems was at the time Beyond Thunderdome came out, there was and what's the word I'm looking for? Gubbins isn't the word. Bobbins isn't the word. Um,
But it does rhyme, right? It rhymes
yeah,
with those.
it's a word that has some kind of rhyming sense with that. But anyway, there was an absolute deluge of post-apocalyptic movies that were
Yeah.
around. You had Patrick Swayze in Steel Dawn, and you had all sorts of other ones that were like that. And there was loads of people just doing post-apocalyptic films. And then on the other side, you had video games like Fallout and stuff like that were starting to appear. And you had Wasteland as I think a tabletop RPG became a video game as well. So there was a lot of post-apocalyptic. See, I want to. My brain is saying post-apoplectic. No, it's not post-apoplectic.
Well, that's
Post,
Civil War, isn't it?
yeah,
That's what that's
yes,
about. That's a post-apoplectic movie.
yes, it is. Uh, there was a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction around,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
think people were kind of getting sick of it. They wanted something different. It's like what
Mm.
happened recently with all the superhero movies. People were just getting tired of superhero movies. They just wanted something different,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the reasons why the addition of Tina Turner was to quite a few people just kind of this. Yeah, they put in this really big name to for the star power to pull people in to see it. But
Mm.
Tina Turner isn't kind of the biggest name that would get people into the cinema to watch things.
Yeah, it's true. If they wanted to sell out, they could have sold out much more gratuitously than
I
that.
mean, if you had options at the time, let's
Hmm.
say it was 1985 when it came out, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Right? You had loads of options at the time. There was
yeah.
Madonna. You could have gone with. You could have gone with Michael Jackson. Oh my God, Michael Jackson in a Mad Max movie would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, can't even. I mean, we've watched Moonwalker
Yeah,
as part of this podcast, and yeah, the idea of those two worlds colliding is it's really something.
yeah. But I mean, that was Michael Jackson kind of 10 years later, wasn't it? That was '90s Moonwalker, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. That's
Was
late
it not?
80s. I'm
Was
pretty
that late
sure
'80s?
it's
All
after
right.
this, but not long after this.
Okay. I I can't remember when Moonwalker was. I just know that it was Bobbins and I loved it. Um, but yeah, there were so many different people. I mean, even Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran could have been in it. That would have been a
Yeah,
bigger pull. But
yeah.
they went with Tina Turner, and I think when you watch the film, you kind of get why they went with Tina Turner.
Hmm. Because you need someone who's very larger than life, very
Yeah,
theatrical presence,
yeah,
and who can be sort of over the top, but not in a way that's funny, over the top in a way that keeps the authority.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, she's a good choice for that.
yeah, absolutely. She has this weird gravitas, which she's always had. That stage
Mm,
presence that she always had when she was on the stage singing.
yeah,
It's that thing that you just can't teach someone, even as an actor. You either
mm,
have it or you don't.
yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're sort of touching on here, as well as the kind of fatigue of
Yeah,
post-apocalyptic movies, which you'd have to assume most of those post-apocalyptic movies were being made because Mad Max was such a big hit.
well, it was kind of because Mad Max was such a big hit, but 1985, you're talking about kind of towards the end of the Cold War period. And
Yeah,
people think the 80s was totally Cold War, but 1985 was in the latter years of the Cold War period. The Cold War period was a long time. It was a couple of
yeah,
decades, if I remember rightly. So you're heading towards the latter end of the Cold War period, the last decade of the Cold War period. But the threat of nuclear war was still very rife in people's
absolutely.
imaginations, which is one of the reasons why post-apocalyptic movies and fiction in general flourished so much because it was
Mm.
there at the back of everyone's minds.
Yeah, yeah, there is that. And I think the other factor in it, when I was watching it, and I think there are problems with the film. I think it
Yeah.
doesn't hang together as beautifully as something like Fury Road does.
Yes. Yeah.
But in terms of things that I think might have turned people off at the time, I think when something comes up from a country like Australia or Japan or indeed Britain, from
Yeah.
somewhere outside of the Hollywood ecosystem, when something comes up that is sort of that takes on Hollywood at its own game,
Yeah.
the fans are always very, very anxious about signs that it's becoming Americanized.
Yeah. Yeah. You
And I
are absolutely
imagine that
right.
when you put Tina Turner in, and when there's a lot of kids in the movie as well, in the context of that kind of 80s Spielbergy cinema environment, I can imagine a lot of people who love the first two Mad Max movies going, "Oh shit, no, they've got to George Miller."
Yeah. And in a sense, I can see the what you're. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. It hasn't really changed even now.
Mm,
But for me, that was kind of neither here nor there when I watched it the first time, and even when I watch it now, I kind of take it as it is. I take it as, weirdly enough, I take it as light entertainment, and I don't mean kind of tell a few jokes, do a little song and dance, and then end of show kind of thing.
yeah,
Light entertainment as it passes for in this country, for example.
yeah, yeah. Although there is a musical accompaniment. It's got that going for it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I regard it like that, and I think that if you're watching it as a serious movie, you know,
Mm,
if you're watching it kind of in the same way that you might watch Oppenheimer or something like that, then you're watching it wrong, I would say.
Yeah. Now, as someone who hasn't seen the first two Mad Max movies, but who has decided after watching this that I am absolutely going to,
Yeah.
I thought, oh wow, if this is the crap one, then I'm very excited to see the great ones. But
I am not going to say anything about the first two films because I don't want to spoil them for you.
fair,
And you know, and I'm also not going to tell you what my opinion is on the ranking of of all three, where they stand in comparison to each other,
okay.
because that would again, put my bias onto you. It's up to you to make your own judgments on that front. I know which one I found my favorite, but again, not going to say a word.
I'll check in after I've seen them, and we'll see if they match up. But
Yeah.
yeah, so with that in mind, without spoiling anything, do you think the tone of this is dissimilar to the first two movies, and if so, how?
It does have a lot of similarities in terms of its tone and its atmosphere, but
Mm,
and this is the big thing, and this is also, you touched upon it, the inclusion of the kids, the
yeah.
Americanization. It has been toned down.
Mm,
The violence is not as gratuitous as it was before.
yeah.
In the first two films, the violence is a lot more in your face.
Mm,
They have elements of that still in Thunderdome. I will be calling it Thunderdome from now on, by the way. I don't call it
y-
Beyond Thunderdome because Thunderdome is just shorthand.
yeah.
I'm sorry, but in kind of the cultural conscience of people who watch films, if I say Thunderdome to any person who watches films just because that's their hobby, they're gonna know what I'm talking about.
They know what that is. Yeah,
Yeah,
assuming that they don't sort of have that half second where they're thinking, isn't that one of the Sean Connery Bonds? But yeah, they know
yeah,
what that is.
exactly. And then they'll go two men enter, one man leaves.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing for a film that supposedly disappointed people. There
Yeah,
are a lot of bits of this where I'm watching it and thinking, "Oh, that's what that's referring to." Right, I'd heard that
exactly.
line before. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's come out of the toning down is it made it more accessible to a
Mm,
to a wider audience, which, yes, okay, for the diehard fans, that's a bad thing. But I think in general, if you didn't have Thunderdome, you don't get Fury Road.
yes, and I'm glad you said that because there were large parts of the third act in particular where I thought, oh yeah, you can definitely see the roadmap to Fury Road in
Yeah,
this.
exactly. What I think has been, I think what I, hold on, words are hard. What I think is part of the genius of George Miller
Mm,
is that he created this post-apocalyptic world,
yeah.
kind of not exactly from scratch, because we had a vague idea of post-apocalyptic worlds and how they'd be and stuff like that. But he did kind of for the post-apocalyptic worlds what Romero did for zombie movies.
Mm,
He nailed down certain rules that laid the foundations for world building for all sorts of post-apocalyptic fiction.
yes.
Fuel being a desperate resource, water being a desperate resource, people being a desperate resource.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that I think a lot of, because I've read a lot of early sci-fi that some of which dealt with post-apocalyptic worlds. And I think Brave New World, for example, is a post-apocalyptic story. People
right.
don't realize
Yeah.
that it is, but it is because it's set a long time after, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a fair point. You're right. It gets remembered as a dystopian story, but it has that other element in it.
you know and there's a lot of fiction, a lot of science fiction like that. And one of the things that I think that Miller did was nail down rules for building a world in a post-apocalyptic climate,
Mm.
where certain things you could use as kind of tropes. These would be your foundations. You can build on these.
Yeah, and what I think makes those so potent is that he introduces them as if they were already tropes.
Yeah,
He introduces every bit of world building is introduced with a sort of a symbol or a line of dialogue
yeah,
that suggests you already know it, and it's beautifully sophisticated because as soon as someone treats you like that as an audience member,
yeah,
your imagination starts going on it, and it doesn't
yeah,
matter whether you're watching a low budget Australian indie like the first Mad Max or a mega budget Hollywood blockbuster like they are now. Those little touches help to expand it beyond whatever the production can manage.
yeah, absolutely. And I think when you come to these sort of stories, one of the big enemies is, to quote Austin Powers, Basil exposition is one
Yes.
of the big enemies.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very true. I think it also means that the films haven't dated. You can sometimes look back at films that
Yeah,
created tropes and they drag because they're having to explain things that by now everyone knows because
yeah,
everyone's seen them ripped off. Whereas the Mad Max films just blast through their world building and it never ages in that regard. I mean, something like Bartertown is such a simple and
yeah,
pure idea that you don't really need to learn any more about it other than the sign saying Bartertown.
yeah. I mean, if you know what barter means, then it
Yeah,
makes sense. It
you've
makes
got it.
complete sense. You have no currency.
Mm,
There is no coinage. The what currency they have is in the form of barter. I mean, if you have bullets, you can trade it for food. If you have fuel, you can trade it for water. Things like that.
yeah. And the laws of what is acceptable in other civilizations are loosened a bit in Bartertown. It's basically why I expect the Teesside Freeport will be like when they get that off the
Oh, he went there. He went there.
Yeah, I think one of the things in the film that maybe doesn't hang together is also one of the things that's interesting. It's a kind of a noble failure, this, but certainly compared to Fury Road and compared to what I've heard about some of the other films, there is no one here who's entirely despicable. There isn't a villain who you really
Yes,
want dead.
yes. I mean, well, maybe that guy who just seems to be unkillable towards the end.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
because I did find myself thinking, just die. You know, just he was on the cowcatcher at the front of the train. He was hanging off the train and fell in the gorge, and still he's coming back in another vehicle for more. I was just
Yes.
like, if that was me, I'd be in a broken mess, going, I want to go home.
But the opening act in Bartertown sets up what seems to be like a classic weird George Miller villain and then immediately undercuts it, which is
Yeah,
Master Blaster.
yeah, and this is there is a weird thing with Master Blaster, which I don't know if it's true or not. I noticed this, and I thought, okay, this is a bit weird. And I went back and watched the original Mad Max, and I was like, okay, um, that's an odd thing because
Hmm.
I thought this character died, but is that the
Yeah.
same character?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things about the Mad Max franchise, isn't it? That
Yeah,
makes it sort of certainly, I mean, it was different then. It's a very unique thing to be asking people to watch now when every Hollywood blockbuster is like choked up with mythos. But these films are absolutely chaotic with their
yeah.
continuity.
Well, one of the reasons why I think possibly it is the same character, not the
Mm.
same actor, but the same character, is because Tokota became Imotan Joe.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I remember you saying that actually
You
when
know,
we were doing the collective.
um, you will when you watch the other films, you'll see it straight away. Okay,
Mm.
there's no way you can not see it. Um,
Okay, okay.
so yeah, Tokota becomes Imotan Joe, and we've got the new Fury. Oh, why words so hard today, Graham?
The
We got
new
the new
Furiosa or new Riosa. Yes.
new Riosa. Yeah, new Fury.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it. New Riosa. That's easier to say.
Yeah.
Although it does sound like some kind of mental condition.
It does a bit. Yeah. Yeah. Of a headache tablet.
Do you suffer from migraines? Take new Riosa.
But
Uh,
I mean, Miller is very unashamed of like overwriting his old material if he sincerely believes the new stuff is better. Like
yeah.
the start of this film, you've got the pilot who's apparently on Take Your Kid to Work Day, which is
Yes.
great. But there's story about why they cast Bruce Spence for that because he'd played the gyro captain in Mad Max 2, The Road
Yes.
Warrior.
Yeah.
And they were having loads of discussions about, oh, we've got this kind of another pilot character, and Bruce did it really well. Where do we find someone like Bruce? And eventually they just said, well, Bruce is kind of like Bruce, I guess. It's a very Australian discussion, I think.
Yeah. I could actually see that happening.
But yeah, it's and you know, he is happy for the new stuff to contradict the old stuff if it strengthens what the new stuff is.
See, the weird thing is that in terms of the pilot,
Mm,
having uh, having him play the gyro captain and the pilot didn't actually contradict itself. It actually
okay.
made sense
Yeah.
because of, and I'm not going to see. I have to cut myself off there. And I'm going
Okay,
to say
okay,
just
that's
because
fine.
of, and I'm leaving it at that. But when you watch the second movie, hopefully you'll see what I saw, and
Okay.
you'll go, "All right, okay, I see what Rob was talking about now."
Yeah, fair. I suppose the other thing I'm picking up on in Miller's attitude is that he will often make a film, particularly a new Mad Max film,
Yeah,
as a sort of response to or expansion on the last one. So he's been perfectly upfront about the fact that he made Road Warrior because he didn't have enough money on the first Mad Max to do everything he wanted to.
oh yeah,
So once it was a hit and once Mel Gibson became more of a star, he got the money together to do that. While they were doing Road Warrior, they had a child character in that who was originally going to come from a sort of tribe of child characters,
yeah,
but they couldn't pull that off, so they ended up putting that in this movie. And as I say, quite a lot of Fury Road feels like Miller looking back to Beyond Thunderdome and going, all right, let me do that again, but in a way where everyone's gonna get it.
yeah. And the weird thing is, see, what I like about the Mad Max films is
Hmm.
that Max as a character, um, you know the, do you know the idea of the hero with a thousand faces?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so to me, it feels like Miller is creating in this post-apocalyptic world the character of Max, who is the literal kind of avatar, say, of the hero with a thousand faces. I mean, with a new actor taking on the role of Max now,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's not Mel Gibson anymore because he's too old for all that.
And the other stuff.
Yeah, and the other stuff, but we'll go with age. We're being nice.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, with a new actor taking on the role of Max, and possibly other actors taking on the role of Max going
Mm.
forward, which would be interesting if Max became this kind of post-apocalyptic Bond type character,
Yeah, yeah.
because this is a world where society has fragmented, and now you have little tribes all over the place, and you got a sense of that in Thunderdome when they keep
Mm.
referring to Max as Captain Walker.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end of Thunderdome, when they're doing kind of the epilogue at the end, and they're talking about the myth of Captain Walker and how he's going to bring the tribes home and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if, because there's a scene in Fury Road when
Mm.
they're escaping from Imitanjo, and I think it's in the blue scenes where Max
Okay.
goes into the mist, and all
Yeah,
you hear is violence, and then he
yeah,
just comes back. And that when I saw that, I thought, is Miller doing what I think he's doing? Is he creating this hero with 1,000 faces?
yeah. Because Max is, I mean, when we talk about the hero with Thousand Faces and Joseph Campbell, it's that there's like the academic meaning of that, and there's
Yeah,
what Hollywood has taken from that, which
yeah,
is they diverge after a point. And I think a lot of what Hollywood's taken from Campbell is, they've worked out ways to root an action hero's conflict more in their personal history, in their
yeah,
personal backstory, in destiny, in chosen ones, and all this.
yeah,
And Max Rockatansky is the exact opposite of that. Max Rockatansky just walks around until
yeah.
he finds a fight worth having, and
Exactly.
when it's done, he walks off. He's much closer to a sort of classic Western hero like Django or
Yeah,
Shane than he is any modern superhero.
yeah. Django Shane, or even the Clint Eastwood ones, Pale Rider and stuff like that.
Well, they actually call him the man with no name in this. So
Exactly.
yeah, it literalizes the link. Yeah.
So, from that perspective, I think if Miller continues doing stuff like this, I look forward to it. I welcome it
I
because
think
it's been a long
yeah.
time since we've had a character like that in cinema.
Yes.
Yes, we have Bond and everything like that, but we know what Bond is all about by now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's quite subversive in that Max's fights are always bigger than himself.
Yeah,
This kind of Hollywood Campbell that I'm talking about, where the hero's enemy always turns out to be, famously, the film that brought Campbell into Hollywood's purview, it turns out to be his father,
hmm.
or it turns out to be the father of his best friend, like Green
Yeah,
Goblin, or something else that ties it in like that. When it's done right, it can be very satisfying, but it's also kind of solipsistic. It also kind of
yeah,
teaches you that, if you're a real hero, there is basically nothing outside your immediate circle of family and friends that's worth giving a shit about. And
yeah,
I like that Max is a guy who takes on other people's fights.
yeah. Unwillingly as well. I like
Yeah,
the fact that he really just wants to be left alone.
yeah,
He's a bit like Hulk in that respect, classic Hulk, where he's just kind of wanting to be left alone. He just wants people to leave him alone, let him deal with his stuff, get his head together, and then he'd be fine. But
yeah,
nobody
yeah,
wants to leave Hulk alone. In the same way, no one wants to leave Max alone. They're all going, Max, do this for us. Max, do that for us. He's like, oh, that's why he's so mad. That's why he's mad. He's
yeah,
angry all the time because everybody just kind of, yeah, do this, do this, do this, do this. You'd be
yeah.
furious as well, or Furiosa.
I would, yeah. I'd have to take a new Riosa for my headache. Um, but yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's one of those things that gets weirder the more it stays the same. It's like I
Yes.
chuckled at the bit where the kids are all looking at the Viewmaster of
Yeah.
scenes of the pre-apocalyptic world and going, remember this, because even though they keep bringing it back, Mad Max never becomes a sort of comfortable nostalgia franchise in that way. It doesn't succumb to that kind of, the thing that the new Ghostbusters movies have, where every time there is a thing from the original, even if it's a thing that meant nothing to the characters, a slow pan over it, it caught in a dusty beam of sunlight, single piano note mournfully on the soundtrack. And there's nothing like that in the Mad Max movies. The
Yeah.
things that are the through line, the things that Miller keeps the same, are the bits where it's most at odds with normal Hollywood, and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Ghostbusters movie, the new one. I saw the trailer and the Slimer thing just kind of got me. I went, yep, I think I've just about checked out now. Um,
Yeah, same.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely agree with you on Miller's methodology. I think
Mm,
that I think the man is a little bit crazy and a little bit weird,
Yes.
and I love that.
You have to be sort of mad to want to spend what should be your retirement years in the desert making $200 million action movies. It's
Yeah,
no job for a man his age. It's no job for
yeah.
a man my age.
But I mean, when your job is making $200 million action movies that have people playing electric guitars that are also flamethrowers on top of a massive car going at 80 miles an hour through the desert, what's not cool
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting that so much of Miller's personality comes through here because he has said
Yeah,
he's been very upfront in saying that he was very checked out during the making of this. His production partner, Byron Kennedy, who'd helped him get the first two movies off the ground when no one else believed in him, had just died in, I think it was a plane crash, wasn't it?
yeah.
Something
I
like
think it was
that.
a
Yeah.
plane crash. Yeah,
Yeah. And he got George Ogilvy in to co-direct because he just could not face
yeah.
making a movie on this scale, really, on his own.
And the thing is, the fact that there was a second director does show because there is a dissonance in parts of this film.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, it's kind of when you have two writers who aren't quite compatible
Mm.
writing one story, and you get that kind of narrative dissonance in parts of it.
I think it's a film that stops and starts, which
Yeah,
is not something and not an accusation you could ever level at Fury Road.
yeah. Fury Road just keeps going, and
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I love that film. But yeah, it does stop and start. But weirdly, it kind of works in that sense.
Mm.
It does kind of work in that sense. I think one of the, I think they made it work because they realized there was, just these things didn't quite link together. So they went, okay,
Mm.
right, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to go cut there, jam them together, let people make up what they want about it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I am very fond of the ending because a friend of mine has a joke that every Mad Max film should end with them just like walking into the nearest town or city and realizing that it's not a post-apocalyptic world, it's just Australia. Uh, and this comes close to actually doing that, I think.
Yes, it does. It
Yeah.
does. See, what your friend has suggested is the Lord of the Flies ending.
Yes. Or worse, the M. Night Shyamalan's The Village ending.
Oh
But
God,
yeah,
I think I'd choose my ending rather than
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
But yeah, it does come close to that. I didn't mind the inclusion of the kids. I think the kids
Mm,
worked, and the way they explained the tribe of kids, I think, worked as well. Especially that scene where they go into the desert and you see just the wreckage of the plane still there.
yeah,
Um, and I like the fact that they played a little bit on the idea that the kids were abandoned and left alone, and they had certain things like when they're in the train and they see the record and like
yes,
it must be, and they put it on and they start turning it, trying to
yeah,
communicate with somebody.
yeah, yeah, that's great. And
Yeah,
all of that kind of Canticle for Leibowitz stuff
yeah,
where it's like trying to work out what a post-apocalyptic society would think our artifacts were
yeah,
is it's an old trope. It's not one of Miller's original tropes, but it's done well.
yeah. And again, it's one of the things where he's taken something that probably already existed. The rules for
Yeah.
post-apocalypse probably already existed,
Mm.
but he's basically nailed them down. Like I said, he's made the building blocks that everyone can use.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I'm fascinated by the way that he met Ogilvy,
Mm,
the co-director, which is that they'd worked on The Dismissal, which is apparently a mini-series about the 1975 Australian constitutional crisis. And I love the idea that you can make a mini series about the end of Gough Whitlam's prime ministership and think, yeah, this guy could do a Mad Max movie. He could make the jump.
I love the idea that Australia had a prime minister whose first name was Goth.
Well, maybe this is like the Mad Max films are wisely very loose about when they're set and when
Yeah.
this apocalypse happens. You know, they don't have that problem that other science fiction franchises have, where they
Yeah.
catch up with themselves. But maybe the 1975 Australian constitutional crisis is what kicks off this whole planet-ending war. Maybe
Yeah.
that's where it came from.
Possibly, you never know. I mean, one of the things that I will say is that only the first film, you look at it and you go, right, that's clearly the first film. There
Yeah.
is a very clear demarcation between the first film and all of the films that come after.
I've seen some clips from the first film, and it like you say, what I saw was different, but it also really excited me because it looked like a sort of not quite a horror movie, but definitely a kind of outback exploitation movie. It
Yeah,
has that definite flavor to it. And I love that. I love anything with a sense of place. I love anything that, can take, even if it's a very simple genre plot, if you can
yeah.
take that and root it in somewhere that feels real rather than the usual Vancouver pretending to be some other city, it just automatically makes it better for me.
The thing that I find hilarious about that Vancouver pretending to be any other city is that if you read any comments from Vancouver residents when that happens,
Yeah, yeah.
I think the best one was, "That's my house."
Yeah, in the middle of Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
apparently. Yeah, yeah. It came to mind because, as you know, Rob, I've recently been rewatching The X-Files,
Yeah.
and man, the number of places that Mulder and Scully visit, which coincidentally also happen to have massive Vancouver-style pine forests.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, don't think you find those forests in that area that you're supposed to be going to.
Nope. The nadir of it is that season 1 episode, which starts with a UFO being shot down by NATO troops over the rainy redwood
Yeah.
forests of Turkey.
Yep. Because Turkey is notorious for its redwood.
Yeah, and it's such a damp climate. Everyone knows that about Turkey.
Yeah. I mean, just how did they make it Turkish? They had people trying to sell us kebabs. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
We went to the Turkish baths where we were massaged by a large man with a mustache.
Mulder is introduced having a full shave with a wet razor.
Yes. Oh, I would pay to see that episode, actually.
But yeah, it's one of the great things about Mad Max is that it is a defiantly Australian
Yes.
franchise.
Yeah,
And
and I think even with Fury Road, that
Mhm.
defiance is still there, which is why
Totally.
I'm looking forward to Furiosa, because
Well,
I'm hoping it's
Furiosa,
still there.
yeah, I mean, I've in the trailers for Furiosa, you've already got Chris Hemsworth playing like this new villain as the kind of Larry Australian bloke from hell.
Yeah.
It's very Australian stuff, and I love that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The DNA of Mad Max hasn't changed through hopefully 5 movies,
Mm-hmm.
and also through a video game and various comic books and various other forms of fiction. The DNA of Mad Max hasn't changed, but all of that wider fiction, all of those things that are included in kind of the world building of Mad Max, all add to the mythos of Max.
Yeah,
Which is one of the reasons why I love the idea of a character who is unwillingly the hero going from
yeah,
place to place. Even Terry Pratchett played on the whole idea of Mad Max in a book called The Last Continent, I believe it was, and this world book called The Last Continent, where Rincewind has ended up. through magical accidents of various
Mm.
types. Rincewind is the wizard who has to spell the word wizard on his hat to remind people that he is a wizard. So he spells it with two Z's instead of one. He is the only level 0 wizard in existence.
Right.
Yeah. And also the gods and fate seem to like picking on him for some reason. And somehow he has ended up in kind of the outback of this continent that is apparently there and not there at the same time. In the way that Australia, they thought maybe it's there, maybe it isn't.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a brief kind of weird internet conspiracy theory that people don't believe Australia exists, wasn't there? I
Yeah,
think it's
well, I mean,
like every
hundreds,
bad idea from the past, it's had its comeback.
yeah, hundreds of years ago, that was the case. They did think Australia didn't exist,
Yeah,
because it really, they had this area where it's like, okay, there's loads of sea around there. There must be something there. There must be something there. And
yeah.
eventually they went and found there was a continent there. So they thought, yeah, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make it a prison.
Yes, we found this new paradise in a location where you'd only dreamed that such things could exist.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're sending all our bastards there. The British Empire was wild.
Yeah. Um, Going back to Pratchett for a second, I just want to
Mm,
read this out to
yeah,
you, right?
yeah.
This is from the back of The Last Continent. Yeah.
Mm.
It says, who is this hero striding across the red desert? Sheep shearer, beer drinker, bushranger, and someone who'll even eat a meat pie floater when he's sober. Now, doesn't that sound like Max?
It really does. Yes, yeah. I mean, what he's eating at the start of Fury Road is pretty disgusting.
Exactly. He'll even eat a meat pie floater when he's sober.
Yeah. But yeah, it is that old-fashioned Western hero, the trickster hero, whatever you call it, that feels so new now. And I
Yeah.
think it's why, as much as I don't like Mel Gibson either as a man or a screen presence normally, but he works in this role because he seems like a guy who doesn't give a shit if you like him or not. And
I
that's
think,
what it needs.
yeah, there is that. But I think one of the other reasons is knowing Mel Gibson as we do now, we kind of enjoy the fact that he gets the crap kicked out of him constantly.
Yes. There's also that. Yeah, yeah.
And again, that's one of the reasons why I think Max as a character works so well is because he isn't invincible. He isn't invulnerable.
Yes.
He takes a beating just like a normal person would, but unlike a normal person, he doesn't stay down.
Yeah, yeah. I think I sometimes miss sort of trends in action movies because I only intermittently watch them. But
Yeah,
I did see Monkey Man, the Dev Patel
yeah.
movie. I
I
don't know
love
if you've
Dev
seen.
Patel.
Oh, he's so great. Have you
He's
seen Monkey Man
I
yet?
haven't seen it yet. I am looking forward to it.
I'm going to say something that isn't a spoiler, but it's something that I noticed a lot of people saying, and I didn't notice it myself, but when they said it, I thought, oh yeah, that's why it feels exciting. That's why it feels fresh. That his character in it is wronged by people, but it's not John Wick. It's not they've wronged him and oh no, he's the biggest badass in the world. It's no, they've pretty handily beat him. They've thrashed him,
Yeah,
and now he has to find a way to get his own back with what he has. And
yeah,
it's again that same underdog aspect makes it a much more relatable
yeah.
story.
And it's the everyman character. The
Mm,
everyman is not a great fighter. The
mm,
everyman is basically just a normal person, who might be going to the shops one day. Maybe they get mugged or something like that. Maybe they get beaten up by a gang,
yeah,
and they basically want to get their own back, and they find a way to do that.
yeah.
And that's, we all love those stories because we all relate to them.
Yeah, and it feels like if Hollywood wants to like assess what it can do in this post superhero fatigue world, I think re-engage with that, re-engage with characters who aren't the chosen one, who haven't been prophesized to do this,
Yeah.
whose parents weren't anyone important. It is maybe telling the town full of Nepo babies keeps going to that trope, but
Yeah. I mean, the thing that really bugs me about this whole chosen one thing, I'm like,
mm,
just really, just if you want to do a story about a chosen one, about some kid who has been prophesized to save the world and blah 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 blah, just do the Belgariad and be done with it. Just do Part of Prophecy and the rest of them by David Eddings, do the Belgariad and the Malloreon, then you're done. Okay, get it out of your system. Because the first book in the Belgariad is literally called Part of Prophecy.
I'll I'll look that up. I was not familiar with that, but yeah, that's a furious recommendation, and it's made me sit up and pay attention.
Well, they're very easy fantasy books to read, and they were
Mm,
popular for a time. But yeah, and David Eddings is very easy to read as a writer anyway.
yeah.
Or rather David and Leigh Eddings, because he did have his wife helping him out with a lot of the work. So, she finally got onto the cover with her
Okay.
husband later on. But yeah, just do the Belgariad and the Malloreon and you're done. You're fine. Get it out of your system. You've got 10 books to work through there. And that's only if you do those two and you don't do Belgarath the Sorcerer and Polgarath the Sorceress. Then you're done. Okay? Just get it out of your system.
Listeners, this is very much how I felt when he was coming out with all the Mad Max trilogy lore on our Fury Road episode.
Yeah, I have a lot of useless information in my head, along with a lot of technical data, how to build a computer.
And it's why we have you around. It
Yeah,
really is.
I am the odd job Rob.
Yeah. Well, in a perhaps slightly too revealing look at our recording and scheduling practices, listeners, I'm pleased to note that we might be able to get this done before Taskmaster comes on, so that's all right.
Yes,
Um, but there is one thing that I think is very important to note before we go, because apart from Tina Turner, who, as we've said, is exactly right for the role of Aunty Entity, there is another connection this has to the world of music, and specifically African American music. And I don't know if you know what that is, Rob.
I am curious because this might surprise me.
The video to California Love by Tupac was shot on the original Thunderdome set.
Really,
Yes.
I did not know that.
How cool is that?
That's brilliant. See,
Yeah.
I will be honest, right? I always wanted the Thunderdome set to be like this little play park thing. Let the kids go wild. Let them go in the Thunderdome. You know, let them,
Because it's
with their plastic swords going, two men enter, one man leaves.
because it's such a tactile world, isn't it? They're all
Yeah,
climbing up on it, and yeah, everything, even in the new ones, even the CGI is sort of touchable and
yeah.
chunky, and you can imagine it fitting together. Yeah.
And again, that's one of the brilliant things about the world that Miller's created is that
Mm,
it is very tactile.
yeah.
There are things in the world where you just go, You know, I can see that. I can see if there was a post-apocalypse, in that world, this would be a thing. It makes
Yeah.
sense. Whereas in other post-apocalyptic fiction, movies, games, whatever, you see things that are like, well, really?
Yeah, normally if you think about a Hollywood post-apocalyptic film for a minute,
Yeah,
it starts to fall to bits. Whereas, as we've said, with Miller's world building, it invites you to do that. That's the
yeah,
pleasure.
because he doesn't explain,
Yeah,
and that is the best thing. Basil exposition is not at home in Miller's movies.
definitely. Yes, yeah. Oh, well, Rob, could you just let people know where they can find you and your work on the internet?
Well, you can find me loitering around in the back rooms of the Geek Show, making sure everything is still running, along with the other Rob. He is basically keeping everything afloat. He's balancing and spinning all sorts of plates, and me, I'm just there, kind of, blowing the bellows into the boiler, so the steam keeps generating, so everything keeps ticking over.
And in a more concrete sense,
Yeah,
you
you'll find
like
me.
me.
You can find me
You're on
on.
last night, aren't you? Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
often
on.
on last night.
I am on last night. We take it in turns now.
Yeah.
To do
Yeah.
last night. So you'll find me on last night. You'll find me in the on the Geek Show live stream, which will be coming soon. You'll also find me doing various bits like Uncut, and also hopefully this time more episodes of Pop Screen.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. And aside from my Geek Show and Pop Screen work, you can find me on Instagram at Graham W Films and on Letterboxd if you just search for Graham Williamson. But until a fortnight's time, when we'll be back with more Pop Screen, I've been Graham.
And I've been Rob.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.